Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today we are going to continue our discussion about the merits of paying attention to where tension isn't found. And as we started last week, we were saying, people do what the rule implies. They pay attention to tension. That's a universal truth about human behavior. You can take that to the bank. But there are plenty of times that we as professionals need to be instrumental in helping that client to realize that there is value in looking at the things that are plotting too far down grid, the things where they are experiencing very little tension. Now, why is that true? And to get things going about today's discussion, it's because we know that when we look at an individual's change grid, and we see a lot of things plotting very far down grid, down here in power, apathy, and apathy, we know that what we are looking at, or could very well be looking at, is untapped potential. So as we move further and further down grid, our ability is going up, the perceived challenge is going down. And here we are in an area where we now find our strengths, where we find our successes, where we find the proof of our proven track record, where we can find all those laurels we can celebrate. But if we're not really thoughtful about it, we can slip all the way down deep, deep, deep into apathy, where we begin to rest on those laurels. We begin to take a whole lot of things for granted. Then comes along some upgrade situation and suddenly we're scrambling. And what we sometimes need to do is realize that the solution to the upgrade puzzles, the upgrade challenges, could be found in the untapped potential of these downgrid plotted activities, these downgrid plotted, successes, history, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So today, what I want to do is talk about how that plays out at an individual sort of level. So before we launch into that, I'll open the floor for anyone to share any ahas, any insights, thoughts they had following last week's discussion about this phenomenon happening in business settings. Anyone have any stories they want to share, thoughts they want to share?
Well, the only thing that comes to mind, T, is that by pointing at the things that we did to achieve downgrid success or mastery, do those same steps therefore apply upgrade challenges.
And isn't that the whole point of this? We're kind of going like, look, the reason why someone is too far upgrade, I'll do this as a quiz question, so all of you feel free to unmute and chime in. And then Dragon, I think you've got a story you want to share as well, but what's someone missing that's put them upgrade? Why are they upgrade? So Kathy, I think you've unmuted. Anyone?
They're upgrade because they don't think they have the resources they need to do whatever it is that's being asked of them in that situation. They don't have the wherewithal, whether it's money, time, smarts, energy, whatever it is.
And I like the way that you framed that because I'm getting a lot of feedback. If you guys want to mute unless you're speaking, that would help with the little feedback part. One of the things that we certainly know that's happening upgrid is that these people, as Kathy has pointed out, feel as though they're missing resources. But Kathy, as Kathy said, she said they perceive themselves as missing resources. In truth, all of the resources they need could very well be waiting for them downgrid in these successes, these proven situations that they have downgrid. That's why one of the downgrid maneuvers is restore resources. Sometimes all we need to do to move a person from being too far upgrid to a more productive place on the change grid is to simply reacquaint them, reconnect them with whatever these, you think about ability, knowledge, skill, experience, and some core physical resources. Maybe we just need to remind them that they've done what they've done, that they have what they have, that they just need to remobilize that. Go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we have some lawnmowers outside. So
that's all right. We all do that.
Yeah. No, I think that's very real. I mean, I know I do that to myself a lot. It's like, okay, I mean, I simply have forgotten so many of the things that I've done in my now long life that I've been there, done that, and totally take it for granted. And Oftentimes, especially when you're working with a more mature client that you're coaching, somebody who's facing a change in their life, somebody who's in a transitional stage, they, because what they're looking at, they see as a new challenge, they they have not taken the time to say, I actually do have a whole set of skills, competencies that I've labeled differently and applied in different situations, and just haven't made a connection between the things that I've already done and the skills that I've brought to bear to this new role. I mean, and I always think about the classic case of a woman who's a housewife, who's entering the workforce or something, and has a ton of organization skills and a ton of planning skills and a ton of resource management skills that she doesn't realize she's had, just because she's labeled her. I mean, that's a very classic example, but
Exactly.
labeled herself as a housewife. And what gets in our way often are those labels that we place, the boxes that we place our skill sets in, and don't open ourselves up to, whoa, this is actually totally appropriate to what it is I'm trying to do now.
Excellent. And I'll share a little personal story I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate to. So I had a client who wanted me to do a particular program and asked me if I could send them over like a little one-page overview sort of thing they could share with whoever. Um, deliverables, that'll basic kind of stuff you do for a training program. And so I'm like writing it all out and just fleshing it all up, putting all my little bullet points in there. And then I went like, oh, I want this one little diagram. Let me go find that diagram on my little hard drive or whatever. And I went looking for that diagram, and I was looking for the little diagram. I found a briefing that was already done that was exactly what I needed. For what I completely forgotten that I had already written a briefing on this very same thing. It's kind of like so you would think that being asked to create a briefing would be enough of a stimulant to remind you or to trigger the memory that you had actually already done this. And then I go and I look at that and I find I have a whole file folder full of briefings of things that I've written up. So I had many other versions of it, and they all needed to be tweaked, obviously, for this particular client. But how often do we find ourselves redoing things that, looking back, you go, wow, I've already done this. Now I'll chalk that up to the fact that I'm 63 years old now, and so maybe I'm getting a little bit forgetful, and maybe after having a 40+ year long career, you just kind of lose track of all the stuff you did many moons ago. But nevertheless, you would think that that request would have been sufficient to trigger my recollection that I had already done such a thing before. Anyone have any stories they want to share about similar things they've done?
That's happened to me so many times, T, and it's just, and I think I must be just losing my mind, that yes, I wrote a whole paper on that, 10, 12, 20 years ago, or I already have a whole file on that, or yeah, I actually did that work.
Yeah.
And you just forget because it's just not as important to you right now.
Right. I'll share a variation on that. Kathy, I'm sure you've experienced this and many of the others on the call as well. And again, feel free to share your stories. That okay, you're just you're looking through all of your old archives for something in particular, and you kind of stumble across something else along the way. You know how you find these um, little distractions. How often have you guys looked at a document and went like, wow, I wrote that? I completely, I don't even know that I look at it when like, wow, I have no recollection at all of ever writing that article. Or, sometimes you're just like impressed with yourself because you're like, wow, I was good. That was good. I should use that again. And so, yeah, a lot of us have got all kinds of things tucked away that we completely forget. Um, and I guess if I really put my mind to it, I could go back and all these things that I've written over all these years. And I have to believe there's some really good articles there just waiting to be shared. Or maybe there's enough to say, here's a whole book's worth of stuff that maybe I should put forth and call it like Out of the Mind of Me or something or another. So there you go. All right. So to bring this very close to our client work, one of the things that I've certainly encountered with my clients time and time again is the client who feels as though they are unfulfilled, underutilized, whatever their frame around it happens to be. And so we have them fill out a change grid, and invariably their change grid shows very deep plotting, so very far down grid sorts of plottings. Um, and one of the things we have to remind them of is that while the pursuit of mastery is a wonderful thing, the achievement of mastery is overrated. And so, yeah, have your own little celebration. Yay, good for you. You met whatever the objective happens to be. Aren't you special? Fine, get that over and done with. And the next day, you're kind of going like, okay, well, now what? Well, this whole feeling of untapped potential is what I really want to focus on. Clients who, in fact, if you guys remember, one of the things I've described about apathy is that when you are apathy, you feel as though you are trapped in a. Can any of you answer the rest of it? Two words: trapped in. It's a place. You feel trapped in a. I'll let you guys think about that and unmute if you want to throw out an answer there. But it describes people who have had a long period of success.
Velvet prison.
Trapped in a velvet prison. Thank you, Edie. Trapped in a velvet prison. And what a velvet prison is one where um, on the outside, any outsider looking in would see you as being very successful, having all of the trappings of that success, nothing you should be complaining about, nothing you have to worry about, and yet you feel badly about yourself, or you feel depressed, or underutilized, or whatever the case may be. So you can't find joy in an actual situation that others aspire to be in. And so you feel trapped in a velvet prison. Edie, what would you like to share about trapped in a velvet prison? Did you have any? Did you just remember that, or did you have a story you wanted to share? Okay, well, you're still unmuted, just so you know. All right, so yeah, go ahead, anybody? Yep.
I was just going to say, I think, I right now with the vacation rentals, it brings in good income, so it's hard to let go of it. So it's velvet, but it's a prison because I feel like for the first time in my life, I'm not doing what my purpose is. And I even wrote a book on it. So I almost feel like a violation of the soul.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we're getting some metallic sort of feedback on your line there, Edie, but I'll definitely just kind of expand upon that and just say that's one of the real issues with people who feel trapped in a velvet prison. And that is that they actually feel guilty about their own success because they're not genuinely enjoying it. Maybe they're even dealing with a little bit of the imposter phenomenon. Those of you who have not discovered that book, it was written back, I believe, in the 1980s, and I forget the name of the author. Somebody unmute and remind me if you remember who wrote The Imposter Phenomenon. And in this book, they basically said there's a whole lot of very successful people out there. In fact, they quoted some very high statistics, 70% or more of the successful people out there believe that the success they've enjoyed has been because they were in the right place at the right time, or they were able to pull the wool over somebody's eye, pull the rabbit out of the hat at the very last minute, that somehow or other their success was really a matter of luck, not really a matter of the hard work and the effort that they had to put into getting where they were going. And so outsiders view them as being very, very successful, but they themselves view themselves as being imposters. And their greatest fear is being found out, being exposed. And so they operate under this tremendous pressure to constantly show themselves as being worthy for fear that they're going to be exposed as not being worthy. So the whole imposter phenomenon is a very real sort of thing. And it generally happens when people have had a long history of success, and for whatever reason don't genuinely own that success. And so they end up downgrade, but it's a very disturbed downgrade feeling. And that's why downgrade, we do find depression. We also find some anxiety. And I think what Edie was illustrating there was the feeling she has about not walking her talk, when in truth, the only way Edie got to where she is today is because she has walked her talk so long, her shoes no longer have soles. And so, this is it. Edie, you've unmuted. Go right ahead and chime in.
It's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there is a disturbed sort of a feeling that some people feel downgrade, but there are plenty of other people who end up downgrade and are actually okay being there. So let me kind of change the subject a little bit and get you guys to open up and share some stories around this. But how many of you have had clients who, if you look at their change grade, and again, most of you are so fluent in the change grade, you don't even need to have them fill one out to know exactly where they are on the change grade. So you see them or you perceive them as being deep, deep down in apathy, lots of untapped potential, lots of things they could do to remobilize all of the success, to get re-engaged in that work. But the bottom line is they have no interest in doing so whatsoever. So again, looking at the engagement rings, to move from upgrid to downgrid, in general, you moved outgrid along the way. You went from being a conscious incompetent to a conscious competent. And so for a while, you were out here fully engaged, developing that competency, exercising that competency. But as time went on and it became more and more routine and predictable, you slipped out of engagement into downgrid intention, even downgrid awareness, even hypo awareness, where it's way off the radar, not even on the back of the stove anymore. And so there's a lot of times when this actually ends up happening, but instead of the person feeling that disturbance that says, I should formulate an intention, I should get re-engaged, or I could do something. There's so much more I could be doing with all the stuff that there's plenty of people out there who do not feel that way at all. Is that necessarily a problem? If so, why? If not, why not? That's your quiz question. All of y'all begin to unmute now and throw some things in. So Kathy, Edie.
Yeah, I mean, I've just it's not a problem if they don't think it's a problem. I mean, it's, if they've done a lot of things and that's what their life has been. And I mean, it's only when they feel the stress or the lack or the anxiety about doing something new that it becomes a problem. So I mean, from that standpoint, I'm pretty simplistic about it. It might be that they just are ready to do something else and they're okay, or they're ready to just hang out.
Okay, and both those things you just said, I want to explore in greater detail. Edie, go right ahead. And Denise, I saw you unmuted there for just a second. If you want to chime in, feel free.
From a practical standpoint, I agree. There's another part. I think from a more spiritual standpoint, it's like sandpaper, and I got to just process it a little bit.
Okay, yeah. I like that you find some sort of disturbance in that reality. Go ahead, Denise. You're unmuted, but we can't hear you. Oh, okay. Well,
if I can just comment there.
Yeah, go right ahead, Kathy.
Yeah. I mean, I'm with you, Edie, because I'm not somebody who does that. But I think part of what I am learning to do is accept other people for where they are around the time, because I used to really judge that. It's like, oh my God, you should be doing this, or because that's the voice that speaks to me all the time. You should be changing, you should be shifting. And sometimes growth for some people is learning to let go.
Yeah.
So,
I kind of figured you were coming from the same place I would be. But, I think the other thing is is it more denial, or is it, um, unconscious competence or something?
Yeah.
I think it also it depends on where it's coming from, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And we don't know where it's coming from until we explore it,
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Other thoughts on this? I'll throw something else in
Hmm.
the mix. Okay, so you guys know I live in an over 55 community, a very, very large one. And so I'm becoming increasingly fascinated by the mindset of successful seniors. So to end up living in any of these over 55 communities all over the country, you want to stay active. That's the attraction of these kinds of places. And there are dozens upon dozens of these communities scattered all over the country. But there's a lot of people who end up here where you are surrounded by the opportunity to do anything and everything you have ever dreamed of doing, readily available to you at little or no cost. And yet there are people who talk about that they are bored, that there's nothing to do, that they're depressed, and on and on. And so the big thing that people say here in the Sun Cities is that if you're bored, that's your fault because there's plenty here to keep you busy. But it speaks to something that Kathy made mention to. And I'll frame it this way. Maybe what this person needs who's very far downgraded and feeling unfulfilled, et cetera, maybe what they don't need is upgrid maneuvers and outgrid maneuvers. Maybe what they need is a whole new activity list. Maybe what they need. So think about this. When we talked about people being downgrade, having all this untapped potential, we say untapped potential translates into unfulfilled dreams, unmet missions. What's the new dream? What are the new missions? So if you've achieved great success at whatever you're done and you have little or no interest in pursuing those things any further, good for you. But unless you find something else that will
Mhm.
keep you stimulated, you're going to end up suffering from all those downgrade things. People who say they're downgrade and are absolutely happy are either not aware that they're filling their life with other things they find enjoyable, or they're in denial.
Mhm.
So what do you guys think about that?
Well, I
Denise?
think you're right, T, because all their lives they probably have been stimulated by challenge. I mean that
Mhm.
they drink it, they eat it,
Yeah,
and so if they don't have a new one, it's all a new chapter, a new definition of self, and it may not be playing bingo. You know what I mean?
right,
And
right.
so it is a new activity because I don't think those kind of people totally let go of that tempo. I don't.
Mhm. Well, they're used to living at a particular pace, a lot of which could simply be inherent in their personality or their biochemistry. Um,
Mm,
but they haven't found something to fill it with. And certainly the lockdown around COVID didn't do anything to help that situation. So it's a very interesting. Denise has just chatted something over to everybody. You can all see
mm,
this, but what they need to have a spark of curiosity on what would interest them in finding an activity or a place to give back to not receive something from. I think you're absolutely right. And this is one of the things we focus on in the Oracle of the Self, particularly for people who are at what we would refer to as the late autumn or early winter of their life. Okay.
mm,
So, what are you going to do? What do you really want to try? What do you want to find? And whether that's volunteering to do something or whether that's about finding a new hobby, whatever it is, I think it's important that people do. We've met many, many people who have retired, moved to one of the Sun City communities or other over 55 communities, and gone out and gotten a job purely because they wanted to
mm,
do something. And whether they're working, again, we're a community of 35,000 people, and so there's a lot of jobs available inside of Sun City West. Um, And but nearby there's all kinds of other places. We had dinner with some friends on Friday night, our first time going to someone's house to have dinner since COVID. And it was interesting. He's 76 years old, and he's working as a independent sales representative for a whole bunch of companies who are he's a manufacturer's rep. He's 76 years old. It's like, he's putting 200,000 miles a year on his car. So think about that. It's like, buddy, you're 76. So what's prompting you to do this? And it was really, more than anything else, a matter of keeping himself in the game, more than keeping himself stimulated. David, go right ahead. You've unmuted.
I was going to share a very interesting story that happened last week. Are any of you familiar or have heard on the national news about this company called Basecamp?
Just a little bit,
Yeah.
not enough to, yeah, go ahead.
A third of the employees quit in one day.
Really?
Yeah. The CEO actually was online with a group of the senior people when he berated a woman for being a woman and being Asian.
And being what? And being what? Asian?
Asian.
Okay.
And all women. And the national news picked up on it and said that the CEO just told everybody he didn't want politics being discussed amongst their colleagues, that was a zero-sum game, and that anybody who couldn't do that could quit. But that was not the story. And you want to talk about a leader completely undermining, sabotaging, and destroying his own company.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wow. I'm familiar with Basecamp. When I redo my website, I've got to do all the corrections through Basecamp. Is that the Basecamp you're talking about?
Yes. My stepson was their chief marketing officer.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah. They had 15,000 applications for that position, which pays about $350,000 a year, and they selected him.
Good for him.
Yeah.
Wow, great.
And
That's what we used with Camnity, Basecamp.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And he quit.
Oh, my.
Yep.
Good for him.
Yeah, wow.
Yep.
Isn't that
Well,
just?
maybe all of us could get a job now with that company, because I think they need us.
Yeah, if
I don't
nothing
think
else.
you want to work for a leader that
No.
people on the basis of gender and race.
Yeah, I
No.
guess that's.
Now that to me, this is, if I can just comment here, this is a great example of somebody being in apathy. We were talking earlier, to me, depression is a sign that something's wrong. So for me, I don't say it's okay to do nothing if you're depressed. If you're depressed, there's something wrong. So you need that spark of creativity that Denise was talking about. But this guy sounds like somebody who's in apathy about, who he is and what his status quo and his situation, and it makes him clueless.
Yeah.
And so that to me is where that kind of apathy is dangerous, not only to himself, but to others. But to me, that's a form of apathy.
Well, right. And
Is it apathy or outgrid though? It almost seems like arrogance too, do you think?
He expressed it in an outgrid way, but the mindset is more apathy. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't know.
Absolutely. Well, let me go ahead and describe it for you guys. Everyone look at the change grid right now. It's on screen for you. Remember that these 4 powerless points are the exact same point. So the only question is, how do we get to powerlessness? Well, as Kathy's describing the situation, this individual had so much success, everything was going very, very well, blah, 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 on and on and on. He ends up very far down grid. So he's got whatever issues he has going on. And then he decides to go ballistic, which is an outgrid behavior. So, but he didn't go this way to get there. He just jumped immediately. Remember, those 4 danger zones are adjacent to one another. I also wonder, though, if something was going on, as David was sharing the story, he said part of the whole setup in the thing is that this guy must have gotten fed up with people spending time talking about politics or whatever, felt it was a waste of time and energy. Well, was he feeling some stress because productivity numbers weren't being met, or he's just sick of hearing about it, or whatever? So it might have been that he had something upgrid that then triggered him to go out grid. I think that that we'd have to be his therapist to really know which one actually triggered it, because who knows what the story was before the story and the story before that one that kind of led to all that. But what we do know for certain is that his behavior was what we would call dancing on the barrier or dancing on the dark side. And so he's moving all around through all these, and I'm sure I didn't read the story. Now I have to show it up. I wonder if now he's positioning himself as being the victim. You know, people didn't understand. They took him out of context. You know, that's not what he meant, blah, blah, blah. And so now he's seeking some sort of absolution from whatever's going on. That's
Well,
an
I
angry
actually happened
behavior.
to hear it from the person who was on the call.
Well, there you go then. You know, and of course, what kind of legal issues has he now set into motion?
Well, everybody, all 30 of them have separation agreements. My stepson gets $90,000 in pay, 6 months worth of benefits. I mean, he gets to keep all the equipment they bought him. I mean, everything.
Wow.
Wow.
Wow, wow, wow.
Take that times maybe, not 30 times because he's the chief marketing officer, but a third of your company, which is only 40 employees.
Oh my goodness. So they're
Only
operating
40
on
employees,
a
and
shoestring.
he drove a third of them to the exit door with one conversation, which was actually a part of an annual get together.
Oh, good grief.
So T,
Yes, go right ahead, Tim.
yeah, while we were discussing it, I quickly Googled it and found an article speaking about it. And I think David touched on this in his intro of it. And there's one line in here that helps explain the unknown there. And it says, base captain employees said the tension arose from internal conversations about the company itself and its commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion work, and not free-floating arguments about political candidates.
Nope.
Oh, all right. There you go then. Wow. Wow, wow, wow.
But then I'm listening to Fox News on Monday, and they have this whole article about it, lauding this CEO as being, doing a good thing, and other companies should follow in his footsteps.
Oy.
They didn't talk to a single person.
Wow. Well, there you go.
National news. There you go.
National news. Yep. All about selling advertising. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I think this is really interesting because now we've talked about, well, let's say that we became his coach. Not that he's coachable, but let's just say for the sake of illustration that we became his coach. I wonder what it was that ended up like, why would he have a problem with working on diversity and inclusion? I mean, particularly, and if we go a little bit on the stereotypical side already, certain cultures do have a stronger presence in certain industries. And certainly when we talk about technology, in fact, I'll share it with you guys, a quick fun story. Almost all of you remember our employee Pushpinder Singh-Garcha. So Pushpinder came to us when he was a student at UNC Charlotte getting his PhD in computer science. And so he worked for us part-time for, better part of a couple of years while he was finishing up all of his coursework, etc. And it just so happened that while he was working for us, the Olympics were going on. And so we would tease him a little bit and say, why aren't there more people from India in the Olympics? It was all because there was one, I think he was an archery competitor, and he was from India, or maybe he was a biathlete, so archery, and is it cross-country skiing, shooting or something, whatever it is. Yeah. So, but there's just wasn't a very strong presence of athletes from India. And so he goes, yeah, but the day coding becomes an Olympic event, you're going to see a silver medal. Well, no doubt there, no doubt there. And so, you just kind of go like, well, wait, Basecamp is a technology company. You would think it was already predisposed towards inclusion, because those cultures tend to be ones that are historically more prevalent in that industry anyway. So I'm a bit perplexed about why he let his mouth say what he let his mouth say.
Yep.
So
Yep.
it's
They
very
were
weird.
the Asian lady who was in charge of the DEI program was sharing some information about how they could, and they were all very passionate about this committee,
Mhm.
how they could do a better job, and he just started saying, "Why are we listening to a woman? Why are we listening to an Asian? You know,
Wow.
tell us what to do."
And my initial reaction is, why are we listening to him? Does he
Right.
own the company, or is this publicly held now, or what's
It
their?
is funded by Jeff Bezos.
Wow.
Okay, so yeah, someone's got to pay the piper.
Yeah.
And that CEO, I dare say we're going to see a staff change come along pretty quickly on that. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Well, anywho, I think that it's still, again, it could be a situation where someone was just so far down grid that they ended up
Yep.
in the danger zone and went ballistic. Maybe something was going on. It might have moved him up grid. That doesn't sound like the case this time around. Um, but something really upset him and he ended up moving out grid. Either way, we do not find useful, helpful, or sometimes appropriate behavior in any of the danger zones. Usually the only person you're hurting in a danger zone is yourself. But if
Yep.
you're out grid, you could be hurting a whole lot of people, a whole lot of people. Okay, so going back to this idea about untapped potential. So um, this idea that maybe what someone needs is a new activity list. So how much of the work that you're doing with senior individuals in kind of a corporate setting often touches upon not what they do at work, but what do they do when they're not working? And I'll give you an example of this to get the conversation going. We had a client who wanted to expand their leadership team, and they had their eyes focused on and their heart set on convincing this one gal to enter the ranks of leadership team. And she had never shown any interest in doing so. And when she was approached about it, she politely said, "Thank you so much, but I just don't want to do that. I'm happy doing what I'm doing." And so they actually brought us in because they wanted us to, and this is a quote of them, to fix her. So the belief was that she was obviously missing something. There was something going on in her head that was interfering with her seeing how smart it was for her to take advantage of this opportunity and blah, blah, blah. And I went, well, I don't know this gal. I don't know the story. So of course I'll be happy to meet with her if she's interested in meeting. And she was. And I said, so you say you're not interested in that. Tell me the rest of the story. And she very quickly just shared, she goes, I don't derive my fulfillment in life from what I do at work. So I work as a way to pursue the things that bring me the greatest satisfaction in my life. And so if I moved into a leadership role, yeah, I'd have more money or whatever. And I appreciate that they think that I would do that job, but I know what kind of time commitments they'd be looking for, and that would interfere with me doing those things that bring me greatest joy. And so I don't need to share with you what the joy was, but it was stuff that you would expect. So she was very much involved in art. She was involved in being a family with her family and all that. Her mission, her passion had absolutely nothing to do with the job that she held. How many of you have had clients that are similar to that? So a lot of you have unmuted. Go ahead and share. Dragon, David. Yep, go ahead, share.
Well, we keep talking about, I was just thinking about the untapped potential. And I ask myself, for who? For the company or the person?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. You touched exactly with that example, because we make presumptions too quickly sometimes. And you really need to dig in and to see what's behind.
Right.
And I'd love to comment here on this, because this is a cross-cultural issue too, in addition to being a personal issue. people work to live or they live to work, you know, and in the United States, our culture is a live to work culture generally. I mean, it's shifting, but that's the case. And you go to other countries and you talk with other people, particularly a lot of Europeans who's, I mean, you know, I mean, this is based on my experience coaching. A lot of them say, you know, we are happy to leave the job at 40 hours and go home and be with our families and do other things. We work to live. And it varies by culture. I mean, it also varies by generation. In this country, it varies, you know, you know, I mean, more and more people, I think, are coming to that conclusion in this country. But it is that dichotomy, and it's a whole values-based dichotomy. Do you work to live or do you live to work? And it's very interesting to see. And it's like, if somebody's values are they work to live, then you're not going to change that.
Nope.
But that's also assuming that there's a difference. I think the ideal is to be able to do what you love doing and get paid to do it. So I think when there isn't a real black, white work versus play thing, there's another arena where people are fulfilled. So yeah, I agree with you, Kathy, or was that you? It was Kathy, right?
That was Kathy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and
Yeah.
I've often said to clients that we should celebrate every time we end up with an employee who is more than happy to come to work, show up on time, do things well, have a good time while they're doing it, be supportive, be a good team player, and at the end of the day, they go home and live their life. We need an army of those people to really run our businesses. So yeah, we need a few people who want to step up to the plate and, you know, go up the management ranks and all that good sort of a thing. But not everybody is suited for that work, and not everybody wants to do that kind of work. So why is it somehow now, and I think this was her biggest concern, this gal I was sharing the story with you about, her biggest concern was that now her management team would look down upon her because she didn't decide to step up and take the chair, you know, and that they wouldn't just celebrate the fact that she was a good, reliable, long-term employee, et cetera. So how odd that she would be left with that fear that she's now been judged negatively because of what's happened. But in this country, at least, that certainly is the case. One other thing I'll say about the US, and I know this is going to make me sound so un-American, but when I think about the number of billionaires that live in the United States, that came from opportunities in the United States, or the number of ridiculous millionaires, you know, multi-millionaire kinds of things, I think, people, isn't it time for you to go home? Let somebody else do the job. You've made plenty of money. You've got enough. Go find something else to do. You're occupying a space that someone else might like to enjoy. I don't understand the accumulation of mass, ridiculous wealth. I just don't understand what the purpose is. Now, if they're going to use that money to change the world, to fund all kinds of things, that's really great. And we do hear stories about some who want to do that with their wealth, but most of the people that are these crazy billionaires or whatever make no mention of what they're doing. They're just continuing to do what they can do to accumulate. What is the point of doing
I
it?
think the point is power.
The
Yeah.
point is power. Sure. Yeah. But even then, at a certain point in time, when you've got so many billionaires, so many high-level millionaires, how much power does a little bit more get you?
Well,
You
to use
know?
your words, in a functional world, yes, but it's a dysfunctional world.
It is a very dysfunctional world.
Jay,
Yes, go ahead.
maybe this goes to the discussion we were having about greed.
You know what? But I think some people do it because that, you know, like a painter must paint, a writer must write. And so we know, like, authors that write till the day they die. And I'm not sure money is the motive. It's just that's who they are. That's their mission in life. And there is such a sense of fulfillment. It's not necessarily money or greed, but just I'm just thinking my mother at 85, she didn't do it for money, but she started a modeling career at 85. She I said she made money laying on her back. I said, be careful who you say that to. But she was modeling for those beds for old people that go up and down and
Yeah, yeah,
stuff.
yeah, sure.
And so it was just who she was to, and then she was riding elephants with the Green Bay Packers I mean, she just had fun. And did she get paid something for it? But I know it wasn't the motive. It was just
Well, and
doing,
again, that's why for me, with the billionaires, the question that I have isn't about the money. The question is
yeah,
why.
yeah,
Now they
exactly.
say, well, because it allows us to give all kinds of great jobs to people. Well, that's fine. Can you spread the wealth a little bit more out among all the people who are actually making your business successful? So
Mhm.
I don't understand, like, for example, with Amazon, I don't understand how Jeff Bezos can be one of the very wealthiest people on the entire planet and then begrudge his people a livable minimum wage.
That I agree with. Yeah,
I
that's
just don't understand.
right.
So, um, yeah, it gives up that's my real question. Why are you doing it? If you're doing it because you're funding foundations, good for
Mhm,
you. I'm not
mhm,
saying you shouldn't have a lavish lifestyle. You've earned it, but whatever. But the accumulation of wealth purely for the sake of accumulating wealth makes no sense to me. Do something with all that. Otherwise, I think we are looking at an underlying issue.
mhm,
As Linda was pointing to, greed,
mhm,
the desire for power. For what outcome? What's the
mhm.
end game? What's that really all about?
T,
Yes.
there was a wonderful story. It's kind of rare sometimes that you hear wonderful stories, but this man is, I believe he's a billionaire, and it happened early to him in his early 20s. And he decided that he wanted to be the first person in space, civilian. Did anybody else hear this story?
No,
Yep.
go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's paying for 4 seats, and one will be, and maybe you can help me, David, hope, um, gratitude, I think, generosity, and another one. And the other 3 people besides him, 2 of them won their spots because it was something to do with St. Jude's. And then all the money made from this big thing that he's putting together, and I think it's this Saturday that they're launching into space. And these are people that have never been in space.
Right.
These are civilians, will go to St. Jude's.
Hmm.
So I just thought that was the neatest story, that he's paying
Yeah.
for this and promoting it because it's his way of supporting St. Jude's and giving these people an amazing experience.
Yeah, because also that means that he has to pay for them to have all their training. I mean, they might be civilians, but they've got to be trained in what it is that's, to expect or do. I mean, I have to believe the training is intense.
Yeah, he's covering everything.
Yeah. Wow. 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 And see, so that's my point. Let me go ahead. I don't know if y'all just read this note from Denise. They might not have other areas of their life that is satisfying either, like relationships, hobbies, enjoying nature, etc. And that's the part I really wanted to talk about is when people are downgraded, feel trapped in that velvet prison, are feeling depressed, etc. The people who have their own reasons for staying engaged, like all these billionaires, whatever's motivating them, something is motivating them. And that's what's keeping them out grid and engaged, where they're constantly taking that ability they have and applying it to increasingly challenging situations because maybe they like the game. Maybe they, whatever it happens to be, that's what they're already doing. I need to worry about them when they get in the danger zone because of the impact they can have on other people and society in general, as we'll be talking about next week or on Thursday in greater detail. I want to really go about how do we, as human development professionals, help the people that are too far down grid to move themselves into a more engaging space, and same time, how do we help people that are up grid about certain life issues tap into whatever it is they've gained that is waiting for them downgrid. So that restoring of resources to take care of the upgrade things. But the other thing, think about the upgrade maneuvers. So increase standards, change task. What's the new task? Awaken emotions. So those are the two things. I want you to find a new task that will bring to you the emotions of being in a more purposeful place. So that'll bring you pride, that'll bring you confidence, that'll bring you that sense of involvement. Any thoughts to share on that?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. How did they get down grid? What was the secret? What steps did they take? What knowledge did they acquire? What experience did they gain that allowed them to achieve that? And then how did they feel about it once they started achieving it? I think that feeling component of awakening pride is got to be the end goal there.
Absolutely. Absolutely, because it is that feeling that stimulates us to find the next challenge, to keep on the pursuit, keep going, keep going, keep going. That's what we need to do. In the accountable self, we have two subtitles to that program. One is conquering the 80% existence. That's part of what we're talking about down here. But the other one is about becoming a finisher in a world of starters. So these people that we've said have a long track record of proven success and may even to this day be continuing to live in an outgrid, again, not danger zone, but in a healthy outgrid kind of place. These are people who are constantly looking for that new challenge. And so that they don't even see a finish line, let alone think that they've crossed it, or every time they cross one, they see the next one. You get the idea? So that constant increased standard is what they're going against to keep them there. That's all about perceived challenge remaining high. So, but these people that seem to be trapped down here, power, apathy, and apathy, so much they could be doing, whether they choose to stay in the line of activity that brought them downgrid to begin with, or whether they choose a whole new course of activity. This is the work of getting well, going back to, again, living in an over 55 community. These are called active adult communities. How do I keep them active? Um, and that's part of the work there. Thoughts about that? Yep. Go ahead, David.
I was just going to say, did they go down grid because they had a lot of money, or because they had such significant and deep expertise that they were successful? Money, I think,
Yes.
has a tendency to stay down grid. My wife is working with. If I mentioned the name, you would know it. He's a car god.
Okay.
And he's 85, 86 years old, and they're going through their estate plan. And my wife is working with the with the wife. But people keep coming back to him and drawing him back in because of his deep expertise. He's 87 years old.
Right. Yeah. So if he enjoys it, that's really great, but he's certainly not doing it for the money.
No. Oh
Yeah.
God, no. He's got two properties in Ann Arbor, a 20,000 square foot home, and another one that's of somewhat similar size on an adjacent property. Plus, he's got a house. So I can't remember the name of the place, but he was born in Sweden or Switzerland,
Mhm.
and so he's all over the world. But he just, I mean, he is busy every day.
Yep. Yep. Well, and so think about that. Now, I just want to add one thing about how people end up downgrid, because this to me is a very uh, big insight that would apply to what we talked about last time around. People end up downgrid, or successful people end up downgrid because they got ignored, because they were taken for granted. And
Yeah.
so as a result, they achieved mastery over whatever was going on. But no one ever came along and said to them, well, what's next? Let's do something else. And so they said, like, no, thank you so much. You're meeting your quota, or wow, you've done so great, such great things. Go enjoy your retirement, retire early. We need somebody, or some people need somebody to help them find that higher level of challenge and keep keep that challenge. Otherwise, we end up disengaged, and that's the whole problem.
You know what, T, when I wrote Winning How Winners Think What Champions Do, I did interview a lot of my speaker friends.
Hmm.
And one of them was Nito Cobain. He's the guy that turned High Point around to be the Harvard of the Southeast, so to speak. And I just remember when I asked all my speaker author friends about retirement, they almost got upset with me. It was like a dirty word. And it was not, they were just so happy living life on purpose. I have to say that it was now, and I think Nito said it the best. He said, you never retire, you simply redirect. And I
Mhm.
just remember those words. And I think those are the happiest people. I really do, when they can find what they're new. You know, he's now running a university instead of speaking all over the world, although
Yep.
he's sold to some.
Yep, yep,
But
yep.
but he's a happy guy. And is he doing it for the money? He's a multi-millionaire. He is not. He is just doing what he wants to do.
Yep, yep. Yeah, we talk about in the Oracle of the Self that when you retire, it's time to rewire. And so I like that whole idea, but it's just about saying like, hey, now you have the opportunity. And again, this population we're talking about, to be this far down grid, they in all likelihood have little, if any, resource concerns. So they're not worried about where they're going to live or how they're going to eat. I mean, maybe they got some concerns about medical expenses and things like that, but life in the United States is always have that little factor in there. So, but by and large, that's not their concerns. And so is there anything stopping them from finding a new passion, a new mission, a new purpose, a new hobby, a new whatever? Um,
Leadership.
that's the question. Where is the leader that's going to take them? So we talk about upgrade maneuvers. Someone needs to help them, manage them a little bit. But ultimately, we need that leadership role to see that potential of that individual and let them know that we see that potential. That's what moves people out grid. So some can do it for themselves. Most really can't do that. Other thoughts?
Hmm.
I always love your Edie. In fact, you don't know this and no one else knows this, but I'll share this. And so at the end of all of our calls, I end up editing them and then I put them up on YouTube for people to tap into. Well, it's interesting how often after we've all said goodbye, the very last thing we hear on the recording, and Linda can vouch for this, is Edie saying, It's really interesting. It's like,
You're
yeah,
famous, Edie.
we describe it as the Yoda moment. It's like,
That is
so-
funny.
no, it's just the way that it is. And it's usually a few seconds after the goodbyes are over, because I don't terminate the call right away or anything like that. But a few seconds later, we'll hear Edie going, I should do a
We're
compilation
all
video.
going to stay on this call for 5 extra minutes to hear Edie go,
It's great.
That
It's
is
great. It's
funny.
great.
See, now she's going to be thinking about it.
Self-conscious about it.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you our time. We're at the top of the hour right now, but I'll share with you that how in some movies, usually it's spy movies or whatever, you as a character are talking to another character. You're not sure whether this character is real or whether they're in disguise, pretending to be this person And so Linda and I have always said, we need to have some secret word, something that if we ever need to truly validate that we're talking to the right one of us, that we know this is all true. Maybe you guys have had the same silly conversation with people in your own life. What is your code word to let you know you're legit? Well, one of the things is that every time Linda has a good laugh, a good laugh about something, her laugh is not fulfilled. It's not finished. It's not really doing. It's not accomplishing what it sets out to accomplish until she says two words. And those two words are, Linda, you want to tell them what they are?
Oh, shoot.
Oh, shoot. At the end of every good laugh, Linda has a good belly laugh or whatever. She's going to end it by going, oh, shoot. And, it's totally funny. And we'd been married for many years before I had pointed this out to Linda. And, so I think it made her self-conscious, but she still does it.
Yeah, it's spontaneous.
It's just part of it. She's not done. Now, once she says, oh, shoot, she's done. So, but she's not done until she says, oh, shoot. Okay, anywho, so what we'll do is on Thursday, I'll certainly check and see if you guys have any other thoughts you want to share about how this whole idea about untapped potential, or why it's important that we stop to look at what's going on downgrid in order to better help an individual, depending on their situation. Well, I'd like to check in and see if you guys have any further thoughts on that. But I'd also like to see, how does this dynamic play out at a cultural level or at a societal level? So not so much about employees inside of a work setting or individuals in their personal lives. Well, how does this play out at a cultural or societal sort of level?
Wow.
Okay.
Thinking
So-
Native Americans, how differently they deal with this. Yeah.
And, you're going to find many, many, many. Lately, I've been seeing more and more about the Amish. The Amish are back in the news. And so it's really interesting just to see, how do all these different cultures, how do all these different subcultures, societies, etc., how does this play out? Why is it important that they focus on what might be going on downgrid as well, even though their attention, people pay attention to where they find their attention. So I know that nature is compelling them to look at the things that are upgrid, and perhaps to a somewhat lesser degree, look at the things that they're focusing on outgrid. But sometimes it's important that we don't neglect the things that are downgrid. Okay, so with that, one thing I'm going to ask someone to remind me of for Thursday, remind me of the suicide clothesline. Suicide clothesline. That's one thing about individual application that I had on my little talk points here, but we didn't get around to. So someone just remind me, suicide clothesline, and hopefully that stimulates enough curiosity that you guys will remember to remind me. Okay, with that, thank you all very much for joining us on today's Circle of Brilliance. Look forward to chatting with you next time. So bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.